Okay guys, I'm going to show you how to make an infrared pen using some very basic tools and bits you can buy from places like Maplins, etc., or you can get them online. So the infrared pen is going to be used for the Wii controller interactive board. And basically, I'll show you what we're going to be using. We've got a solder iron, we've got some solder, pinchers, some tape, electrical tape, some thin wire, wire cutter, little snips, some super glue, a board marker that you can get from any classroom, I'm sure. And what I've done, I've just taken all the insides out, so you just got a case, a little push to make switch with 2 contacts on the bottom, a battery holder. This is for a small AAA 1.5 battery, and finally our battery. And what I love, this is clever, so let me show you. It shows you how much power is left. How cool is that? I think that's great. Anyway, moving on. The last thing is the infrared LED. Now, with this LED, you can't see it with the naked eye when it's emitting infrared, but on a camera it will show, so that's a good test to see if it's working. So let's get started. First thing I'm going to do is attach some wires onto my LED. So I'll just bring my solder in and just angle it so I can get to it. So I'm just going to add just a little bit of solder to my LED. So a bit on that contact, and a bit on that contact too. So the next thing I'm going to do is cut some wire to attach it to that. So, as I said, I've got my little snips, so I'll just cut it. And you can make it as big as you want for now, because you can always trim it down later. So there's my first piece. There's my second piece. Now I'm just going to take the plastic off the ends. Okay, the next thing to do is just put a little bit of solder on each of these wires. It'll just make it attract when I solder it to the infrared LED. It'll just take it a little bit more. Yeah, and the same with the other one. Okay, good. So now I've got my LED, and I'm just going to attach one of the wires to the end. You can see I'm working on cardboard just to save mess. Just try and get rid of some sharp edges if you can, because also you've got to feed this into the case, the marker case. So there's the first one on. Then I've got the second one. Okay, and there we have it. So there's the wires on our infrared LED. Now what I would do, I mean, you can get plastic sheaths that will cover the edges, but it won't hurt just to put some tape on, just to cover those so they don't touch, because if they touch, it's not going to work. So let's just get some tape. But you could just cover one, just to prevent it. There's one covered. I'll just take it round then. It's all covered. Okay, so we've got our wires on my LED. So what we could do, just to check that it's working, just take these edges off and put them onto our battery. you can see it's working. Now it's important you get your polarity right, so your positive is going to the right end. Because I've used this LED before, I've actually cut off the legs the same length. But when you buy it brand new, one will be longer than the other, and the longer one would be the positive one. So make sure that your wire for your positive end of your battery goes to the long end of your infrared LED. So that just shows that it's working. Okay, so now we're going to fix this into our marker. So here's the top of the marker. And for now, let's just feed these ends through the top. Okay, as you can see, it just sits nicely in the top. Now we want to make that nice and square. Just square it up so it's pretty much in the right place. So there it is now. That isn't going to stay. What we need to do, we need to glue that in. So I'm just going to take it back out for a minute. And use the glue. Now we need to. This is new, so I just need to pierce the end. So done. Put that back on. Okay, now you don't need too much. All I would say is just a little bit around the outside. You can see it coming through there. Put it on all sides. Okay, so that's there. Now, let's fix it into the top. That's looking good. So, my infrared LED is now at the top. I'm just going to put a little bit around the outside. Just to secure it. Okay, now that's in there and that's secured, so I think I'll just put that down now and just let it dry. So let's put the top back on my glue. The thing about this InfaRed pen, it's quite a nice little project. It's not too difficult to make. I'd recommend for anyone to have a go at doing it. It's a simple light, battery and switch. So now we're just going to look at putting the switch into our case. Now here's the case. You can see this is a barrel dry white marker. It was, as I said, I've taken the insides out. Now I pre-drilled a hole in my case to take my switch. But what you could do is just get your soldering iron, and you could work that out with your soldering iron. It'll melt the plastic away, and then just wipe it off your soldering iron. That's another way that I've done it before. So we need to now put our switch into the case. So just take the nut and the washer off. Now this will fit into the casing. Now obviously we need to make sure that we've got the wires connected, the infrared LED and to the battery pack. So we need to think about where we're going to put this battery pack. So this is the one I'm using. As I said, all these bits are from Maplins. It costs a couple of quid for the bits and that's it. So if you think you're going to hold your marker pen like this, and you think where you can put your battery pack, so I think somewhere like there, you could put your battery inside, but it gets a pain because you'd have to take your switch out unless you were to cut the end off. It just gets messy. I like to have my projects nice and neat. So I'd recommend that you put the battery somewhere like that where it's not in the way of your switch. So what we need to do is just look at where the battery's going and just make two little holes in the casing. I'd use the soldering iron for this. So let's just pick up the soldering iron. Just clean that off. And if I can see where it's going to go, then I can just make a little hole in for the one wire, so you can see where that's going to go, and then just have to think about where the other one's going to go. So there's my one on the back, and I'm going to make one my wires to go through. So what I need to do now is just bring the wires through for the battery pack. So let's start to get some wires. Now remember, you can cut these to size later. So I'm just getting some good size wire, some good lengths. Just trim it off. 1, 2. Okay, now if you look at the ends of the battery, you'll see you can put the wire in and twist it, or you can solder. I'm going to solder mine on. I just think it's a little bit easier. So again, I'm just going to apply a bit of solder to both ends. Okay, and then a bit onto my wire. As I said, it'll just make it take a bit easier. And then just put them both together. Just wait for it to dry. This is the first one. And now for the second one. I'm just going to use my wire cutters to help me stand this up. Okay, so solder. Okay, and then my other bit of wire, just put some solder on it. Okay, and then just put it on. Maybe I'll just wait for that to dry. Okay. So now we've got to think of attaching that to our case. So now we're going to feed the ends into our case. So, feed that one up. You can see that's through. Feed this one in. Now this is where the long nose pliers comes in handy, because you may need to get down in there and just grab that wire, bring him through. Okay, and as you can see, that starts to come through. So now a little bit of glue on the back, just to hold the battery compartment in place. So I'm just going to put some on the back there. Okay, like that. I'll put the lid on in a minute. And then position battery compartment where you think best. Just turn it up. And just hold it there for a minute. Just give it a little bit of pressure. It may take a minute or two to dry. Just hold it there. So I'm going to keep on holding this and I'll come back to you in about a minute when I think it's dry. Okay guys, I'm back and that's dried. Still a little bit of movement, but it's definitely better, so it'll get there. So we're going to put our switch in now. As I said, long nose pliers are going to be very, very handy. So what we're going to do, we're going to pull through one of the wires and attach it to the switch. So I've chosen this one. So this is the one that's coming from the negative end of the battery. So I'm just going to snip this off. As I said, you can cut them when you want. So let's just cut that. Okay, and then just take the plastic off. Okay, so as I said, it's easy just to add a bit of solder to it. So let's do that. Okay, now I'm going to do the same to my switch. Let's just add some bits of solder to it. Okay, now let's connect this, move that wire out of the way, and let's just connect this to one end of the switch. Okay, that's done. Let's just put my soldering iron down a minute. Okay, so as you can see, it's coming from the battery, and then onto the switch. And then we need one coming from the switch that's going to go to our infrared LED. So let's put that on now. Now if you remember what I said, we just need to check which is the negative and which is the positive ends. They must be the right way around. Can't emphasize that enough. So let's just put the wires on the battery and see what happens. Now, if the light is on the camera, which it is, no, with the naked eye can't see that, but the camera can, we know which is the positive end. So looking on the battery, this is our positive end. So it's the other end we want to go to the switch, because our switches come off the negative end of the battery. So I'm just going to cut this, just cut a little bit of length off it, because we don't need it all. Okay, let's just give us a little bit of wire so we can solder. Okay, now let's just put a little bit of solder on our negative wire. And there we are. So now that we put a little bit of solder onto our wire, we need to feed the wire through our casing and then out so we can attach it to our switch. And here we go. Like I said, it's easy to put solder on both ends because they'll attach a lot easier. And there we are. There's the wires on our switch. Excellent. Okay, so now if we have a look, it looks a little bit messy, but I promise it won't be. So now, if we just push our switch in to the casing, in it goes, and there it is. So now all we need to do is join these two wires and that should complete our circuit. So, but as I just say, with the switch, that is pushed in, it's nice and tight. Later on, I'll just put a little bit of super glue around the edges. You do get a nut that you can screw inside, but it's too much of a part when you don't need it. The switch isn't going anywhere. It's a nice tight fit, so a little bit of glue will just stop any movement later on. So now let's just move the excess off this wire. So we cut it off, and off this one. I'm using our wire cutters. Off there. And off there. Now, these two are going to be joined, these two wires, which completes our circuit. You can solder this if you want to. I will, just because everything else has been soldered with me, so we'll do this as well. Okay, so let's roll this up a bit. Okay, there we are, and I'll just put a little bit of tape just to cover that end. Just so, you know, you don't want that floating about inside without any tape on, because if it touches the switch, it may stop it from working. Okay, and now all we got to do is push in this end. And close the marker. And there we go. It's closed. So now we've got our infrared marker. Let's just go back and look at what we've done. We've got a wire going from the battery to our switch, from our switch to our infrared LED, and then the other wire going straight from the battery to the LED. So the switch just stops the current from the battery to our infrared light. So now let's put the battery in. And hopefully, you can see, it works. So that's how to make your infrared pen. And in the next video, I'll show you how to connect the Wii controller to your laptop or your computer, and then how to use the actual smoothboard software. Thank you very much.